The bull market is pumping. Bitcoin is at $121,000. Ethereum is at $4,300. And it looks like we're just in this final phase where we get this blow off top, the last phase where everything pumps, and hopefully a massive altcoin season around the corner. So this is going to be a bit of a longer update. I want to go into detail, look at the higher time frame charts, and share with you my thoughts on where I see the market going, levels to watch, and a strategy how you can make the most out of this last phase of the market, because this is when things could pump the most in the shortest period of time. But you need to be prepared, because once the pump is finished, it's all going to come way, way back down again. And it's very likely we're going to have another massive bear market in 2026. The reason why I say that is we are now 478 days past the halving, meaning that the longest that Bitcoin has ever gone in a bull cycle after the halving is 550 days. In the history of Bitcoin, it hasn't continued past that. So while things could be different, every single cycle we hear this time is different because maybe now the ETFs and maybe rate cuts and whatever reasons people are giving, we have to assume that until it is actually different, it's not going to be different. A lot of indicators are starting to heat up. A lot of top signals are starting to come in. So that means we have about 2 months left until we reach that same maximum cycle length for Bitcoin. Altcoins, maybe 2 to 4 weeks longer. So a maximum of about 3 months, in my opinion, is left for the cycle. And that could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be 2 months. We don't know for sure. But what this means is that this is probably the final pump of the whole market. And that means you need to be positioned before it pumps. And as things go higher and higher, you need to reduce risk and scale out, especially in altcoins, because once the pump is over, we're in for a 12-month plus bear market like last times, where we've seen altcoins drop 80, 90, even 99%. Okay, and Bitcoin is also probably going to drop quite an amount, and maybe not 80% like previous cycles, but maybe 70 or 60%, which is still a massive, massive drop. So be careful, you're not buying tops. Have a strategy, have a plan. That's why I'm making these videos, to help you be more informed. If you haven't seen it yet, if you need a place to trade crypto, spot, and futures, BLOFIN exchange is where I personally trade. I have a really, really good deal with them. So currently we're running a campaign where you can get up to 200,000 USDT in cashback on trading volume. That's obviously dependent on trading a lot of volume, but that's incremental based on the volume you trade. There's a link in the description down below if you want to know more about that. Sign up with my link down below and you will be able to be eligible for those cashback campaigns. Okay, so let's start out with Bitcoin. This is the weekly chart. We just had the weekly closes, and the weekly close this recent week is bullish. We're back at 121,000. We're almost at all-time highs here, which was 123,000. But like I've shown you, cycle timing, we're closing in on that maximum length, which is this vertical line over here, about the middle of October at this point, which means there might still be some room for upside depending on how much they push. But we could also be close to a top here in Bitcoin already, and then the money kind of rotates into Ethereum, which we're trying to see right now. I mean, we're already at 4,300. We're close to all-time highs. So maybe we see Bitcoin kind of level out. Maybe it tops around here between 120 and 140. And then we see Ethereum go to all-time highs. And then hopefully we see a big surge in altcoins for the grand finale, and then the bull cycle tops. That has been pretty much the playbook in previous cycles. And you can see over here, this top here in the November 2021, in the previous cycle, I think we're starting to see a potential similarity here. Also, in terms of cycle timing, this was 550 days. This was 18 months after the Bitcoin halving, which is where this vertical line is right now. So we still have about 2 months, and maybe if things go absolutely nuts, maybe they push Bitcoin a little bit higher. But you can see here, we had one little wick here, then a little wick higher, and then it was kind of game over in the previous cycle. So there is still this kind of general area over here between where we are now, 120 and maybe 140 maximum. But you can see also, if you draw a trend line over the top, it's kind of hitting that third thrust at the trend line, maybe at around 130,000. And you can see here, if you look at the RSI on the weekly time frame, we are now approaching a third thrust bearish divergence, right? So this is telling that we are getting close towards a potential end of the trend and either a serious larger pullback or maybe a complete cycle top. And based on the cycle timing, probably a cycle top. You can see here we had this bearish RSI divergence in the previous cycle that was only 2 thrusts. Now we have 3 thrusts, bearish divergence. This is not promising as a bullish continuation, right? We're not looking at this and be like, oh, the bull market is only just starting now. No, it started right over here at the beginning of 2023. We reclaimed the 50-week moving average, and we've been up only since. You can see here, retest, retest, retest. And the official bear confirmation only comes once we lose the 50-week moving average, which is currently at 93,000. So that's still quite a while lower. But I believe here, just based on all of this, the technicals and the cycle timing, that we are closing in on the last 2 months of this cycle. So what gets really interesting here, Bitcoin isn't really interesting anymore. We're at 120,000. I mean, what kind of upside is there? Even if it goes absolutely nuts and it goes to 250,000, that's basically a 2x with a downside risk of more than 50%, in my opinion. Actually, probably more than that, probably like 60, 70% in the next bear market. So the ROI on buying Bitcoin at this point, it doesn't really make sense unless you're looking at like leverage trades where you're going in on the lower time frames and you set certain risk rewards. That's not what this is about. Just in terms of buying spot, unless you have like a 20-year time frame and you're like, I'm going to buy the top now and I don't care if it drops 60%, I'll just keep dollar cost averaging, and 10 years from now it's probably going to be way higher. I mean, you could do that. But in general, Bitcoin is probably not a good ROI here. Now, let's go and look at the stuff that's more interesting that we're all waiting for the last like almost 2 years, which is Altseason. Ethereum almost making new all-time highs. And then, of course, is there going to be a spillover effect on the rest of the coins? So here we have Ethereum. We're currently trading at $4,248. It was already $4,300. So what's important to note is we finally took out the 4,000 equal highs over here, which is very, very nice, because it just means that the concept of equal highs and equal lows getting taken is just something that's valid on all time frames, all charts, whether it's a 5-minute chart, a one hour chart, a weekly chart. As you can see here, eventually the price comes back to take out those equal highs or equal lows because there's just a lot of liquidity here. So we had a perfect little range set up here. You can see the deviation, and it ended up taking the highs. Now we have the all-time highs basically very, very close, less than 20% upside. There's massive buying still going on of Ethereum by whales, mainly companies like Sharplink, who are buying huge amounts of ETH. But at the same time, and this is important, there are whales, OGs, big ETH holders, even from the ICO days of Ethereum, who are waking up, who are starting to sell. So this is distribution. And that happens towards the end of the cycle, where the smart money who's been in for years or been in from the lows, as it goes higher, they start distributing, they start selling when they're up massively. But because of the hype and the pumps, there's new money coming in. So that's the distribution, the transfer from smart money to dumb money, the people who are buying the tops, especially in size, which is usually retail. But in this case, it might actually also be institutions and companies who are drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking they can go and raise money and buy hundreds of millions of ETH at the top of the cycle and have no drawdown and not get wrecked. Okay, they're going to be in for a surprise in the next bear market. But that's fine. You can see here, we have these all-time highs, about 20%. So I do think that we are likely going to see Ethereum all-time highs, maybe even as soon as this month. It's completely possible. Another weekly candle like we had in this past week, 1 or 2 of those, and we're already there. So I do suspect that we will probably get there, which means short-term trading, like any sort of pullbacks towards like 4,000, could be along towards like 5K. Right? But that's short-term trading. I'll cover that in another video. And what is important to note here again is that we are still also creating a weekly RSI divergence here on Ethereum, right? So you can see in the previous cycle top, we had the same thing. RSI divergence, cycle top, down. Okay, that is just how it goes. And we are starting to see that again. It's probably going to be all-time highs, so I don't know where that's going to be, 5,000, 5,500, 6,000 if they really push it. Somewhere there, I would expect us to, whatever, if we go higher like this, we're going to have this bearish RSI divergence on the weekly, the same like the last cycle, and then that's probably lining up with the top. So again, this is not signs of being early in the bull market. This is, in my opinion, the final stage. We're seeing Ethereum pump. I think it's still got room for upside. Like I said, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000 or 6,500, all of that is possible. And then once Ethereum, once that bulk of the pump is done, right, then we're going to start to see more profit taking. But because everyone is counting on this entire bull market, this liquidity from the market, that capital is going to rotate into other stuff. And people who are up big on Ethereum are very likely once again going to rotate into other stuff besides like perpetual and futures trading. They're going to start betting on other stuff. And it seems like it's potentially a complete narrative switch from Solana and the meme coins and the shit coins that we had there earlier in the cycle to this time Ethereum. And that's also important to note, because if you're counting on Solana to do the same as what it did last time, it might not do that. And maybe this time it's Ethereum. And as a result, once Ethereum is done, a revival of all sorts of coins on ETH, maybe DeFi, maybe meme coins on ETH, maybe even NFTs on ETH as a bit of a revival, because that's the narrative now. All the money is going into ETH. The people who are holding the ETH whales, they will be taking profit, and then it rotates into other stuff. So just a reminder, Dogecoin, and the reason I'm showing you specifically these, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, they're the main like big market caps for each sector. And it's a really just good example of what happens here, probably follows in other things. I can't run through all the smaller coins. I will do that in a separate video. I'll try and make as much content as possible. Smash the like button if you enjoy these videos. It helps it go out to more people. Share it, leave comments, really appreciate it. You can see here on Dogecoin, last cycle, in the last 5 weeks here, from starting on April 2021 to the first week of May, Dogecoin did a 10x. A lot of altcoins went absolutely nuts during that same period, but that was the complete top for Dogecoin of the previous cycle. Even though Bitcoin 6 months later made a new all-time high, Dogecoin did not, and many altcoins did not. So that means in a period of 5 weeks, we could see the massive explosion in altcoins, but then it could also be the complete cycle top. And if you don't buy before the pump and you don't sell on the way up, you get completely wrecked, because after that, you can see we're how much further? We're 4 years along and we are still not even anywhere near the previous cycle top. So if you bought anywhere here on the way up and you didn't take profits, you would still be in a loss right now. And that's very, very important. That's the main point I'm trying to make in all these videos here right now. You need to understand the cycles. You need to buy low, and as it goes higher, you need to reduce risk, scale out, take profits, especially on altcoins, because they will go all the way back down, and it could take 3, 4, 5 years before they get back to their all-time highs. If you bought the top, you can get absolutely wrecked. So we've seen Bitcoin pump. We're seeing Ethereum almost at all-time highs. Dogecoin and a lot of other altcoins, you can go look at the charts, they're still relatively low. So what happens if this is indeed the end of the cycle in the next 2 to 3 months? Towards somewhere maybe September, October, altcoins start to go nuts. Dogecoin does a 2x or a 3x or a 4x or a 5x in a very short period of time, along with other altcoins. But don't mistake that as being the start of a new bull run that's going to continue for years. No, this is the final exit pump. Be prepared, be long before the pumps, scale out, remove initial, take profits. And once things go absolutely nuts, like if Dogecoin gets to 50 cents, 75 cents, maybe $1 this cycle, you know, you need to lock in your profit, especially if it's life-changing stuff. If it's like 10 years worth of your annual salary and you're up that unrealized profits, like you need to pay yourself. You need to take that money off the table, because just as quickly as it can come during this final pump, it will all disappear again if you don't take profits. I've seen it over and over and over again in the cycle, so make sure to pay yourself. I'll make a new video on different altcoins, top altcoins, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to wrap this one up right now. Smash the like button if you do enjoy it. Share it with your friends. It helps it get out to more people.